Welcome, one and all, to the Corentus First Friday with a Thought Leader. I am Janice Caillet. I am the co-founder and president and chief catalyst here at Corentus. I am thrilled to be with you. And so welcome community members. So First Friday is live for our community members, for professionals advancing and have a passion for advancing team effectiveness. These are some of the places in which the community members are coming from, but thank you for being here. And as hopefully the majority of you know, the community platform in which we engage in is on Disco. So it's corentus.disco.co. So please go there on a relatively frequent basis because we're posting new IP and new events. So please join us there. We have many thought leaders with us today, 4 to be exact. So Alexander, myself, Christine, and Laura. And Alexander will start. I will chime in from time to time with Alexander, and then I'll bring in Christine and then Laura. And so Alexander, who needs no introduction, but he's the co-founder and CEO of Corentus, and he will be bringing to you today the anatomy of a conflict.
Thrilled to be here talking about this particular topic because it's near and dear to my heart, and it's been that way, ever since I can remember. Being someone who has been averse to conflict my whole life, but has engaged in conflict, I've always wanted to really study it deeply. And so we are indebted to a number of authors for this particular piece today. You can see them here on this chart. And what I'd like to say is this is a sliver, a really, really small sliver of the trove of studies and research and articles that exist in this domain. But the authors who are here in their publications correspond to what we're going to be sharing with you today. So what we want to do is just open up the box, take a look at a few ideas, and share with you one of our main tools at Corentus, which we're going to be giving to you in this particular First Friday as a gift, one that works really well for us and our clients. And with that, let's jump into the first idea. Looking to really understand what the anatomy of conflict is, like how does it really occur? And there's a gentleman by the name of Jeremy Pollack, who is the CEO of Pollack Peace Building Systems. He's an author. He's a pretty well-known individual in this field, who describes it in about 8 phases, of which we're going to study 5 today. Starts from this notion of the calm phase when we're having a conversation with each other. And this is just one type of conflict, to be clear. There are so many dimensions to conflict. But think of this as you with another or you in a group, and you're having a conversation and you're in a calm phase. It's what Metcalf and Mischel in Amy Edmondson's book Teaming call the cool phase. We're having a conversation, we're clear, we're concise, there's good reciprocal exchange. And then something happens, something occurs with one of us that what the other has said or done or has displayed through body language doesn't quite match what we expected. And here we can turn to Lisa Feldman Barrett's work on predictability in the brain and say that what we were predicting doesn't happen. And so there's a trigger, and we've all heard of the trigger phase. And so one of us leaves the cool phase and enters into a warm phase, and we get a little bit on alert about what has happened, and we get triggered. The other stays the same, but in that response of trigger, we then enter into what is called an agitation phase, because the other responds as well, noticing perhaps an emotional reaction, a statement that is made, or body language, which creates agitation. And in the agitation phase, the other also becomes warm. We start to move to hot. We go into the pretty classic amygdala hijack. We start to shut down. We start to go defensive. We see the other person or the group as not being aligned with us. And so we start to act out. And that accelerates. The other joins us into the movement towards the hot phase. The acceleration increases. And now we are in both of what might be called an amygdala hijack. And we can point to Karen Horney's work, turn of the century psychologist, who said that in these phases, we either attack, comply, or withdraw. And so those are some of the actions that we take in peak phase, and it leads to the breakdown, and we have a full-blown conflict. And there's been a lot of neuroscientific research done on the deeper neuroscience of these phases, which you can take a look at. If we turn to another idea, what we call conflict management styles, we can take a look at conflict from another perspective. And it's basically the concern we have for other team members' goals, needs, and interest, and the concern we have for our own goals, needs, and interest. And this has been pretty well documented in the Thomas Kilmann framework, but also by a gentleman named Rahim, who did a lot of work on these styles. And what they basically point to is 5 different styles that emerge in conflict. And these are organizational styles, team styles. And basically, if we have low concern for both, we're going to avoid conflict. If I'm not really that interested in my needs at that moment or interests or my goals, and I don't have that much concern or interest in the other, then I'm going to avoid. If, however, I have a high concern for the other and a lower concern for my own, then I'm going to accommodate. And we go into an accommodation, which can work, except over time, if I'm consistently neglecting my own goals or having a low concern for my goals, accommodation will lead to more of a frustration or a self-denial. If I have high concern for my goals, low concern for another's goals, then competition emerges. And competition is a very well-known style that is very present in many organizations. If there is moderate concern for my goals and moderate concern for others' goals, then I compromise. And compromise is a fine and legitimate situation, but over time, what researchers will say and what we've noticed is that it creates frustration and it creates dissatisfaction in the end. And as Jonathan just said, yeah, accommodation can lead to resentment. Absolutely, Jonathan, well said. And in the end of compromise, we lead to resentment as well. If we have high concern for ones and high concern for others, then we enter into collaboration. Now, this is where we want to be. I have concern for my own interests and goals and needs. I have concern for yours. We can then have a conversation, a collaborative conversation, and can we move towards resolution of conflict? Now, this is an oversimplification, of course, but we find these styles very interesting, and many clients can place themselves on this grid and see where they're at. What it's done for us, though, at Corentus is it's confirmed a couple things about one of our core tools, which is the team wheel, which is the key dimensions of team effectiveness based on our definition, which is that a team is a small group of people who work in collaboration and hold each other mutually accountable to achieve a common purpose and set of shared goals. And we look at 4 key dimensions: common purpose and shared goals, roles and competencies, collaboration and cohesion, and mutual accountability. What we see when we understand the prior slide is if we blow our wheel out to the elements present within the 4 dimensions, that there are certain elements that are really important to get right in teaming. Because what the prior slide was showing is that when we look at concern for others' goals, we have mutual benefit in mind. And mutual benefit is one of the critical components of collaborative conflict management. And what we see here in our particular chart is that common purpose and shared goals, if well laid out and clear, lead to a mutual benefit. We have a common purpose together. We have shared goals together. I care for your concerns. I care for mine. We drive towards a more collaboration style and we can resolve conflict. Now, not always, of course, but often. Same thing with roles and responsibilities and authority and decision rights. If roles are clear and authority and decision rights are clear, then we know what we're doing. We know what we're doing and we have then mutual benefit. It's clear. And finally, accountability and engagement. If we have mutual accountability because we have that accountability for each other and we have engagement towards purpose and goals, responsibilities, and decision rights, then we can get to that collaboration. So we thought that was a pretty compelling conclusion.
Yeah, and just as an add, as you can see, all the different elements that fall under collaboration and cohesion can be, underscored and or engaged in to, decrease the escalation of conflict.
Now, we at Corentus years ago developed a framework called SPINS. And where it comes from is the field of constructive controversy. And the three minds that you want to point to for that are a gentleman by the name of Chazavald and Johnson and Johnson. They wrote a fantastic article, which is referenced on the first slide we showed you. And they talk about constructive controversy as born out of mutual benefit and out of open-minded discussions. And what SPINS does is it reduces the complex controversy methodologies into 4 phases. You can teach this to your clients. They can use it with each other, maybe a facilitator, maybe a team leader or a team member, or they can use it with each other. And it basically says that when you're getting from the cool to the warm phase, before you hit acceleration and peak, someone stops the action, calls a pause, and labels what's going on. We're spiraling. We're not listening to each other. I'm not sure we're hearing each other. And in that stop and notice, they do a somatic break, a breath, stand and stretch. Let's take a break, but there's a somatic break in the stop and the notice. The next step is to listen to each other's perspectives. And this is very well known in conflict management work, that if I will take a moment to listen to your perspective and restate or paraphrase your perspective, and you would take a moment to listen to my perspective and perhaps paraphrase it, we're half the way there, which leads us then to the work of interests. Now, the work on interests here, we know it very well through the work of Getting to Yes by Fisher, Urey, and Patton, who talked a lot about the notion of interests. And here what we're doing is I'm saying, okay, so, and we're calling it needs. It's an easier term to hold on to by most clients. I've heard your perspective. What do you need? That's a powerful, powerful question. And I restate the need, and then here's my need. Once we're there, we're 3/4 of the way there, then we go for solutions. And then it's, so what kinds of solutions can meet both of our needs? What's the joint solution here? What's going to happen? And in that state, you share some solutions, I share some solutions, we have a conversation, we can multi-vote the solutions, we can do some good decision making on it, we can align and come up with 2 or 3 solutions that are satisfactory. Now, SPINS doesn't always work. Sometimes we're accelerating it into peak. It's not going to work. Sometimes the other person doesn't want to play SPINS. So it's not a guarantee, but many times it works. And it's easy to remember and to hold on to. And by the way, one last thing I'd like to say, this works really well in our personal lives. Just saying, it works well at home. So I'll leave it at that. Have some fun with it. And I'll hand the baton over.
Great. Thanks, Alexander. And with that, I'm going to bring our next thought leader, Christine Tello-Lorenz. She is a leadership and organizational psychologist, certified somatic coach by the Embody Lab, and embodiment researcher with over 20 years experience in corporate leadership, team development. Christine helps leaders be the best they can be at work. She holds a psychology degree in leadership psychology and created, say that 10 times fast, in leadership psychology, and created the first body-based leadership assessment. Totally cool. And with that, I bring you Christine.
Thank you so much for having me today, Janice. I'm so grateful to be here to share this research. And, you know, it really follows so nicely with what you were just talking about, especially with regards to the somatic break, because that's part of the first step, right, in conflict. And, you know, one of the reasons why I was so interested in doing this research. And you know, it's another tool, really is what it is, you know, I remember doing the TKI assessment years ago and have always tried to lean into the collaboration and the best practices around conflict. And, you know, realize that, you know, this was so much of a kind of a strategic approach, and, you know, ask myself, well, what about, you know, my body and what I'm feeling in my body, right? I'll tell you just a quick story. I was organizing a 5-day management conference when 2 days before, my company's president told me he needed to use the room that I had booked for those 5 days. So this was a Friday. The conference was starting Monday. And so you can imagine, my reaction. I completely freaked out. Can't tell you the stress and anxiety that I was feeling in my body, and just felt this wave of like vertigo. Didn't pass out, but I didn't have a very good reaction to him and what he was telling me. And eventually we got it worked out. The conference went well. He actually was part of the conference, one of the speakers. And so he was invested. And to your point about, needing to have this shared purpose, shared goal. But, I was thinking to myself, I don't want to react this way. I mean, I had so many feelings in my body, and it just made me think, okay, well, what about what's happening in my body? And so I like how this topic here just kind of follows what you're talking about, is this mind chart and common states that we feel. So the embodiment work is really about what's happening in your body. It's very much physiology, biology, and psychology all together. And it speaks to that part of us that shows up in our behaviors, and it's all based on our past and our experience with it. Some people are very good at being resourceful in the moment and responding skillfully and being resilient, but not everybody is. And so this work really is about tapping more into our body and using that as a lens, as a tool to help us understand ourselves and how we're reacting in those hard moments. So it's that kind of intentional use of the wisdom of our body. So that's the embodiment part. And here's a kind of a definition of the leadership embodiment. My focus is in leadership development. And so I was looking at a tool, a more holistic body-based tool that would go beyond just our thinking selves. And, like they say, take the elevator from our head down to our body and look at how our body can really be a tool in helping us to be more present and aware. And kind of what you were saying earlier is that trigger point, and understanding that trigger more about, just asking yourself, how am I feeling? What's my body telling me? What can I use that to make more meaning of this issue that I'm facing? And to calm ourselves down in the moment so that we can be open and consider other people's perspectives. So as I started my research, I discovered that there was not a assessment tool or a scale that helped people understand or measure leadership embodiment, which I know sounds like a very fuzzy kind of concept, and it is. And so I sought out to create this scale. And in my doctoral research, was able to come up with a reliable 9-item scale showing reliability in measuring leadership embodiment. And so what that scale does is it's a series of questions that asks you to intentionally ask yourself, are you trusting your bodily sensations as a source of information in your role as a leader? Do you put your full self, your mind and body, into your development as a leader? I understand how my behavior affects my health. During stressful moments, I can identify that fight, flight, or freeze response. During the dreaded performance review that every leader and direct report, doesn't like to do, are you aware of your body sensations and how that's influencing the meeting? Do I notice how my behavior is with other people? Am I picking up on the stress or energy levels with direct reports and that dynamic between the other? Am I aware of how my interactions with my team affects my overall effectiveness as a leader? So these were the questions that came out of this research, early research. It needs another round of testing, but I think it speaks to the importance of looking at these questions and asking ourselves in these hard moments, are we really tuning into our body and what it's telling us? So the ask then, when you look at applying this at work, there are many scenarios where we can apply this. It can be in a difficult meeting. And on the next slide, it shows you a little bit more about some of the applications and practices, like that performance review, the high stakes presentations, managing any kind of change where you have resistance. So the embodied practices are all about learning the physiology and the science behind the behavior. It's kind of like going back to biology class, which I know not everybody likes. I happen to like, but it's, really understanding that in those high stress moments, your cortisol skyrockets. So what can you do to lower that? And to your point earlier about deep breathing, we know there's so much research behind it, can lower the cortisol and help us be more present and less triggered in those moments. So as individuals, we can do things. Be more intentional about body scans. Ask yourself, the butterflies in your stomach or the kink in your neck that you're getting, what is that saying about the situation? Notice those things and really try to understand it. And in teams, team norms, we all love our team norms. Well, let's add an embodiment lens to our team norms and use that on ourselves with our teams. Ask each other, what are you feeling? What are you concerned about? What are you noticing in your body about this project we're about to enter into? And be more intentional about leveraging what your body's telling you. So that's really the ask with the embodiment practice as it relates to working together more collaboratively, and especially in those heated moments, like any type of conflict. So I'll pause there and see what questions you have.
Thank you, Christine. Super important. It's amazing how we leave so much of ourself off the table by just going into a meeting with the things that reside from our neck up. So we have an entire body. Let's all use it. So with that, I'm going to bring in Laura Porter. So Laura, drawing from experience with educational institutions, niche consulting firms, and mission-driven nonprofits, and daily negotiations of family life across 4 generations, Laura partners with teams in the meaningful and often messy work of transforming friction from draining tangles into productive tensions that spark new ways of thinking, being, and making gains. That, I bring you Laura.
Yeah, thank you, Janice, and thank you for having me here today too. I'm wondering from this group who is in front of us virtually, even just a show of hands or a finger or a head nod, I'm wondering how many of you have witnessed to been part of a group where you see the conflict grow. So I'm thinking of what Alexander was talking about, that warming phase starts to get redder, not quite full blown yet. And what you're seeing happening is that there's one person who's become really offended by something, and someone else who is really into explaining what their intentions were and how they were misunderstood. Does that resonate with anyone here? Yeah, most everyone. Yeah, feels familiar both personally and professionally. Yeah, and you get that piece of, that wasn't what I meant to say, right? I'm just trying to help. I think you misunderstood me. And what gets in the way there from a productive conversation is that we're defending the intention. And what makes it even worse is that we often assume what someone else's intentions were, or we assert that we know what someone else intended. And so now you've got another layer of conflict that's been added. One, the person feels dismissed or not heard. And now that power shift has come away from the person who was offended, and it's back to the quote unquote offender. So one strategy that I'm using with clients lately to shift from intention to impact comes from Kwame Christian. He is a lawyer and he's the founder of the American Negotiation Project. And he talks about the 3 I's, and those I's are info, impact, and invitation. I call them the 3 I's because I find that my clients it gives them a simple kind of verbiage and frame to hold on to. You can plan for it and you can use it spontaneously in the moment. Either way, it's just as powerful. So info is you're describing the behavior of what happened, either to you or something that you witnessed. You're keeping it very clean factually, non-judgmental, not opinions, just like we learned with Corentus about how to report back what we see. The impact is just focused on what was the effect on you, or what are you hearing was the effect on someone else or your team or the work or the goals that you're working towards. And then the invitation, this is where the power of productivity happens. It's shifting the conversation from what happened to how can we move forward. And the invitation is inviting the other person into realignment or reconnection or resolution. So if you just leave it at impact, there's still kind of this disconnect between the individuals. To work through the conflict, you really want connection, human connection. And like Christine was sharing, like it gets into the body of what's happening for both parties or all parties who are involved. So it could even sound as simple as, I've noticed you've been interrupting me in the last few meetings that we've been together, and it makes me feel really inferior. Can we talk about that? Super simple, not a lot of words. And the focus is on impact there. I was talking with one of the vice presidents for a national property management service firm, and just last week, she said she's been mentoring some summer interns who are coming in. And there's this one particular intern who has not been responding to any of her emails or responding with some lag. And as we talked this through, she said, you know what? All she said to the person was, the last 3 emails I haven't, with a confirmation I was looking for, you haven't responded. The impact on me is that I'm having to spend time thinking, did you get it? Where are we in the process? I'm not clear. And the impact on you is that there's an image of being non-communicative. And I don't think that's what you want. How can we work this out together? And the invitation also shifted it from kind of like a mom, child relationship to one of professional, like you are a part of the solution. And then a third example that I'll share is with a principal of, again, a national engineering firm. And he had been really frustrated with increasing lack around accountability, a lot of missed deadlines, a lot of inaccuracies in work showing up, especially on Friday afternoons after 3 o'clock. And so when we were talking, he said, I really want to be planful because I want to get this right. He's like, I think they know all this, but I'm just going to try it. He gave me permission to share what he said with you. And the reason why I want to share it is because he said he, again, thought that everyone knew the impact. They just were ignoring it or didn't care. But there were shifts and there was information he learned because he went through the process of being explicit. So he said, I've noticed a recurring pattern of delays, errors, and final review submissions. So there's the info. The impact, when work comes in late or incomplete, it's jeopardizing client trust. And it's also putting me into last minute fixes, which is taking me away from business development, which is critical to our income, to our division's growth and our business's growth. He said, so I'd like to invite all of us together to think of 2 questions. 1, what's currently getting in the way of earlier, higher quality submissions? And 2, what specific changes can we commit to improve this process going forward? And this was significant because it was especially that second question where, again, the power dynamic, it was softened. Before, there was definitely a hierarchy at play. And he intentionally used the word of we commit. So it meant that each person had an equal value to make a commitment to a change in the process. And you could only make a commitment if your voice was heard. So there was an expectation of contribution as well. I'm also thinking about the work of Kwame Christian. He's a lawyer. He's the founder of the American Negotiation Project. I mentioned that. He talks about compassionate curiosity. Many of you might already be familiar with that. And this is where that role of impact and invitation come into play. He says, when you're really focused on impact rather than invitation, you're not spending energy spinning your wheels on justification, and both parties never come into alignment. You're consciously choosing a curious stance to understand how someone experienced a moment. And when you understand it, you can then do something with it. So what I'm finding is that teams who are practicing navigating discomfort, not focused on whether they're getting it perfect or not, but at least practicing it by focusing on the impact that they have, they're resolving conflict far more quickly. They're reducing the resentments that they have with one another, and they're definitely creating more mental space on the things that they want to think about, the things that they want to accomplish.
And with that, I am going to stop sharing and welcome questions. So Teresa.
Laura, the example that you started with the person defending their intention because it wasn't received, it was having a different impact, if you will. That was like spot on. I'm in a team right now where that just happened. Could you pull that thread through and like give me an example of what would be another way to approach that? I expect that that's going to happen again. So I'm just like, I want to be able to help that.
Yeah, are you thinking about the thread around just like, I'm just trying to help you. I
That
think
one.
you're misunderstanding me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So intention definitely plays a role here. It's not to be ignored, but it's not the focus. So it's shifting on really understanding, how did I impact you? And what we've learned so much, as both Alexander and Christine have shared, the power of connecting at an emotional level, that has to happen before you can get to the logistics of a productive solution. So in that piece, it's deeply listening, giving the person the space to say, how did this impact you? What were you feeling? And inside, it takes so much reserve to not justify, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I didn't mean to make you feel this way. And then that acknowledgement piece of even just, I'm so sorry. I can see how this made you feel frustrated, or I can see how this made you feel dismissed. And it's almost putting an intentional 3-second pause before you could say, that's certainly not what I intended, but thank you for telling me the impact that it's had on you. And if they don't invite you into a solution, you certainly can invite the collaboration, the working together for that to happen. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, that was helpful. Thank you.
Cool. Jim.
I'm interested in your thoughts around long duration conflict. So now let's imagine that I actually have a client in 20 minutes. So it's a triangle. So it's got 3 actors in it. And apparently they've had several passes that have gotten in their way. So it's been more than a year of conflict. So how does the burn of an instant moment of unhappiness, how does that translate into the cool anger that people feel when they've had multiple passes? Is there a way to use spins or some of these intentionalities besides a proper clearing and a proper mediation? Is there any thoughts on that?
I think so my experience is that, and there's another question that was in the chat around, would spins work in a very toxic environment where there's no trust? So it's a challenge to run a spins where the trust is broken and it's very toxic. You're going to have a challenge with that, and it probably will not work. I mean, the stop functioning of noticing and doing a lot of what Christine and Laura were talking about noticing and stopping and getting somatic for a moment and really embodying yourself and noticing yourself are helpful, but it's still probably not going to work. And
maybe recommend that after they've done their clearing, after they've done some initial new trust building, and then build up their strength with spins. Would that be a good way to think about it?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go, Jim. I think you're right on. I think that, the ability to really do a clearing, a mediation, have more of a negotiated centered approach to conflict management, which is something totally different, is going to yield better consequences than at least what we're sharing with you today, which is the spins methodology. Then you do spins after as a skill.
Nice. Yeah, because I got Natalie Thompson lined up as my federally trained mediator. So good.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
Natalie is a wizard at this.
Jonathan and Christine.
I was just going to jump in and just to say that, from my point of view, it's about practicing this over and over with intentionality. And even though you might be someone who is not good at conflict, you're an avoider, you're an accommodator, but it's only with practice that you're going to get better. And the team all has to be on board. Both parties have to be on board with that intentional goal in mind to want to work together. So to me, it's so much about intentionality. And then it also doesn't mean you're going to be great at it. So even though, you are someone who practices, you might be someone who's still really struggling with it. So it doesn't always mean success. It just means to be intentional and to get the support that you need.
And if I could just jump in with one more piece, what I have found over the years is the simple act of teaching people to share their perspectives, of stopping for a moment and asking, what is your perspective, is a powerful act. And let me share my perspective. It's not a guarantee, but it's a big step forward for many human beings to stop and ask.
Yeah, that also connects with what Pam Ross had asked in the chat as well. If someone is so intent on sharing their intentions and kind of justifying, it may be worth just to hear that out, because they clearly have a need at that point to be heard and to feel understood as well as part of the clearing. And then once that out, like Alexander's saying, you can say, may I share my perspective as well? And then you get to the part around the impact.
Jonathan, do you want to share?
Yeah, sure. A couple of things. I mean, I bring my perspective as both a coach and also a couples therapist, and these things do tend to overlap. And one of the challenges is some people think that explaining their intention will be heard when somebody can't hear it because it feels so dismissive. So just helping them at least, or trying to help them to understand the timing of the explanation when things are hot, I think is really important. And then two quick comments. One is when we apologize, if we don't understand what it is we're apologizing for, it's likely to feel insincere. And sometimes the best we can do is say, I really want to understand this so that I can apologize. But a premature apology can be ineffective. And then just one other comment, I think, which is remembering that there are reasons that people have the conflict styles they have. They've learned through their lifetime at home and also culturally what it means to speak up or not speak up. And if we don't remember that, we can push people way out of their comfort zone in ways that are not going to be helpful.
That's well said.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. It's great. Sharon?
Sure. So Jonathan, you mentioned couples therapy. So I volunteer for this organization called Braver Angels. We are working in that political polarization space by listening to each other. So this reminded me of this acronym we use, LAP, L-A-P-P. And the goal is not to change the other person's mind, but to understand them. That's kind of the bar. And actually that helps build the connection and then for further conversation. So that's my connection to this business work, to this political realm, that it seems impossible, but the simple listening and acknowledging is so powerful.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Jennifer.
Hi. As I started working more and more with groups in conflict, I started becoming more and more aware of the depth of where my conflict avoidance was coming from and the flooding. And doing some somatic work and some parts work was able to start to touch on the long time ago impact of conflict in my life. And so I was wondering, Christine, if you would comment a little bit on what, because we know that what we bring as a coach is so important to that, to the field. And so Christine, I was wondering if you would comment on some of this use of somatics and our stance as a coach in adjusting to conflict. Adjusting might not be the right word. Yeah,
I love that question. And thank you for raising such an important point about how we as practitioners want to be aware of how we're showing up, and we could be inadvertently triggered in a moment, right? Based on our past and how the conflict is really affecting us. And yeah, absolutely. The practices that we use with people, there's a variety of things that somatics teaches us in terms of the techniques that we can use, everything from breathing and just really asking ourselves, what's behind that, and what is it that our body's telling us that we need, so that we can give that to ourselves and be able to help ourselves as practitioners as well, right? Really walk the talk and use that in a way to really just ground ourselves and make sure that we are, using these tools with other people. And with any other type of lens or tool, it's asking the coachee, is it okay if I ask these questions? Is it okay if we work in this way? It's a tool just like any other tool that we can use with people, and it varies, obviously, as you know, by coachee and where you take them, where you go with them, and what they need. And so, but yeah, I would say that you can certainly ask your coachee if that's a tool that they are comfortable with you using.
Merrick, sorry, my bad.
No problem. Thank you very much. Thank you for this wonderful forum. This is my first visit with you all, so very, very interesting. I come from a place where all of this is, if I step back, I look at our personal involvement within or our personal responsibility in a group setting. And one of the first things that I look at and try to create within the group or the team is that responsibility that we all have, in the sense sort of summed up by the quote that thought is not necessarily reality, but it is through thought that we create our reality. And that connection, that thought feeling connection, that our feelings are external, but our thoughts are internal. We're generating our experience in the moment with the people around the team or whatever. So when we start exploring those things, our thoughts and our feelings and our bodies, I love that part early on too. We feel something, our body has a sensation, we have an emotion tied to it. And then, of course, the originator is the thought. What are we making up about this situation? And it kind of tends to calm me and the folks that I work with, and gives them insight as to, oh, wow, I'm generating some issue here that doesn't need to be here. This is my issue, not the team's issue. And we tend to be lighter, which raises you into that more positive field above the line. So I'm finding everything that you're contributing here just sort of feeds into that general narrative of the thought feeling connection.
Nice.
So, anyway, thank you all.
Thank you, Merrick.
Thank you, Merrick.
Yeah.
Great. You'll notice that the title of our tool is not conflict management, but it's called embracing conflict. So when teams can come together to really neutrally share differing points of view that may be in conflict with one another, does not mean there has to be what we call escalated high emotion conflict. Having two opposing views is really helpful to put on a table, especially in an executive level, to decrease risk. It's such a great gift to think to yourself, oh my gosh, what everyone's talking about, I have a completely different point of view on, and I feel comfortable sharing it because this will be helpful to the team and to the organization. That is a successful team and a successful organization. It reminds me of Keegan and Leahy's work on deliberately developmental organizations, DDOs, where in those organizations, if you did not bring up your opposing view, that could be cause for firing or something like that. You need to bring in those opposing ideas, those opposing thoughts, those opposing opinions and perspectives. That's what keeps those organizations who follow DDO extremely successful. Just a thought. Anybody else wish to share?
I'd love to just jump in with one more thing, Janice.
Please.
So I really loved the work that Christine brought to our forum today, brought embodiment, and I have a particular interest in what does it take to be in the noticing of our triggers?
Somatically, you mean?
Somatically. So I think what Merrick just said
Yeah.
about, thought creates reality, thought and feelings. Like how do we help people become in the noticing of the trigger? Oh, I am triggered. And to hold that, not as something I react to or I have to, but just to hold it and be with it and let it settle, to gain back the consciousness and the awareness of I can have a different pathway now. Because we get so caught up in the trigger that we start to lose, quote, consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and we go down the other path. So it's just something I'm going to think about coming out of today, which I think is a really valuable kind of combination of our ideas today. Thank you, Christine.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond quickly. I know we don't have much time. So what you just asked is the best question because we don't learn how to do this. There is a language, there's a science behind it. There's a way to pause and notice and words that you can use to tap into how you're feeling physically. And we don't use that because we don't know it. So there's a huge opportunity and a need for this type of work. And, we could spend another hour just on that easily. But yeah, and then it's being with it because this isn't easy work. It's not to say that this is therapy and we're asking coaches or practitioners to be therapists, but it is a different skill set. There's been some interesting discussion with the International Coach Federation about including this in one of the coach competencies because it's not there. And so it's a whole different skill set. And yeah, and it's not about this being easy because it's about bringing up, feelings and thoughts and stories, based on what your body's telling you that you might not have ever known before, or something from your past that really is scary. And coming to terms with that and being with it, as you said, and learning from it and growing from it. So it's not easy work, and there's a huge opportunity.
So thank you, Christine, and thank you, Laura, for coming forward and being our additional thought leaders today. Super helpful. Thank you, Alexander, for bringing the anatomy of conflict, and thank you, all of you, for being here and coming together to share some of your Friday with us. And so I'm so happy. Who's noticed that we've moved these, or we've extended the times of these from 45 minutes to 1 hour? I'm hoping that's okay, but it seems to give us more time for Q&A and it doesn't feel so rushed. So with that, Alexander, you can do a mindfulness moment.
I can?
You can. I think it's been over a year since we had time for a mindfulness moment at the end. So
this is the way we like to close. What we would have you do is just for a quick second, close your eyes and reflect back on the past 60 minutes and ask yourself this question. You can take a breath. And the question is, what did you just learn? Another question is, what is one insight or aha you're walking away with today? And just let that settle in your mind. And the third question is, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with that insight or that aha? And you can feel free to jot a note down if that works for you. We did it, Janice, and it's 1 o'clock, at least Eastern time.
So again, thank you. I love you all. Thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Take care.